In this Q&A, we're going to talk about the reality of pricing within greyhound betting. Okay, so it's a reasonable question, thanks for submitting. The problem is with greyhound betting, the markets are very fickle and they're very small and they're very unliquid, and that exhibits different characteristics when it comes to betting pricing and the prices moving. To add extra confusion to that, I think it's quite reasonable to say, and quite obvious in most instances, anybody who's smart can see it, greyhound betting is extremely bent. And I think a lot of people that actually make their money in greyhound betting do it through having insider information. So that's not the best bit of news there for the general public, I'm sure, but it's still possible to make money within greyhound betting, absolutely, but you just need to understand why and what it is that motivates price movement and the way the greyhound markets behave. So I think the first problem that comes with the view on greyhound betting, and like you say there about the prices and the way the prices move, is the fact that people view it as the same as other sports. So if we were to compare greyhound betting with football, the markets behave extremely different because they're quite literally at different ends of the spectrum. If you think of the Premier League in football, the markets are highly liquid, they're very solid, they're quite well informed, and there's a lot of money that passes through them, and early on. On greyhound betting, it's quite the opposite. They're very small. Yes, it's still on the TV. Yes, it's still in the newspapers, but far less money passes through their markets. And then on top of that, there's a lot more greyhound markets every single day. So you've got to think, if there's like 70 greyhound markets in a day, the money is spread throughout those 70 markets. People's interest is thinly spread, whereas football, yeah, there may be more games on a Saturday afternoon, but typically there's a lot less, and there's a huge volume of people that are placing bets on those markets and providing liquidity. So I think to eradicate the confusion, you just need to understand that, you know, at the very base level, greyhound betting is a completely different beast to horse racing or even football or even maybe tennis. So the sporadic moves, I think in a lot of cases, come from, as I mentioned, that inside money and the fact that all the genuine money flows into greyhound markets very late. You've got to think, sometimes they're 5 minutes apart, and sometimes there's races going off at exactly the same time. So the genuine money, as it piles into the market, is typically an empty market. There's less money to be matched against, and that's why the big price moves happen, and the same happens with the bookmakers, which might be why you struggle to get your bets on. In fact, I'd almost put money on it. That's exactly why you struggle to get your bets on, because the markets liven up quite late. So this leads me in nicely to the second point, which is market formation with a greyhound market. So as I said, with football, sometimes there's a huge amount of liquidity in the market days before a football match, whereas on greyhounds it typically comes in the last 3 minutes. And sometimes that's even less, depending on scheduling, TV coverage, that kind of stuff as well. So as the market starts to form is where you see those drastic moves, and that's where you find it harder to get your bets on at the prices that you want, which is the most important thing, because we need to take value to profit on a consistent basis. So the last 3 minutes is where they pick up, and typically the last minute is only really where a greyhounds market is, you know, typically quite well formed. The wisdom of the crowd has come in and people are betting against each other, and, you know, perception exhibits itself in the market through the greyhounds pricing. The influencing factors around that depend largely on the type of racing, what's happening with the scheduling, the coverage, as I just previously mentioned, and, you know, who's involved in that market. So following on from that, it's quite clear, if you want to make the money, you need to get the value. You need to get the price that you want, which is where it's extremely hard for greyhound betting, because you experience what we call slippage. Basically that's where, you know, you see a price, you want to take that price, as does other people that are looking to take value. The price moves very quickly, and when you go to get your bet on, the price has slipped. I think the problem comes around staking and doing that safely, because when the market's less liquid, there's less money on offer. Obviously you increase your margin for error the larger the stakes you use, and so it's harder to open a value position. That's not to say you can't, but I think typically a lot of people that make money from greyhound betting are quite possibly automated, but they're generally taking small returns on a consistent basis, time and again, throughout the greyhound markets. Very few of them are getting large stakes on, taking a big move and then trading out that stake, or even letting it run if they're straight betting. And the reason for that is because, you know, in order to do that successfully and be quite comfortable with what you're doing, you need to have that extra element of information which is possibly not available in the public domain, which leads me back to my original point of there's a lot of inside information. You have to remember the greyhound betting industry doesn't necessarily thrive off of some of the other things that the other industries do. I mean sports, sorry, such as football and horse racing. And so the trainers are not winning a lot of money if their dog wins a race. They need to get their money back somehow, and I think that that's generally exhibited through the betting markets, and that's why the prizes just tend to crumble really quickly, which is obviously only good if you can get on at the price you need. So inside information is probably driven, but it does express itself in the markets. Does that mean that every single greyhound race is going to have a huge move and there's going to be a lot of volume and a big gamble go on? No, it doesn't, unfortunately. It might mean that you might have to sit there and watch 5-10, and then you can find one where you can trade at a more reasonable size stake, which is less than ideal for many people, and particularly if you're not a very patient individual. So I think, in answer to your element of the question there where you said, is it better to trade greyhound racing than others? I would say generally no, unless you're into being extremely patient, taking very small profits on a consistent basis, and you're quite happy to let them just build up, and you're not necessarily looking for the really big money. So that's my answer there to greyhound betting. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for submitting a question for the Q&A.